Welcome everyone to episode 30 of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. Today we have a pretty cool episode. I know I say that every week, but this one is really cool.
This time, Jesse's not lying.
I'm not lying. It is the Fall Musky Madness episode. Insert madness music. So this week our episode sponsor is actually Musky Maniacs. And Musky Maniacs, if you don't know, it's one of the hottest and best looking musky fishing apparel companies out there. And their stuff is really good quality. Me and Andrew have been wearing their stuff this year. In fact, Andrew got me hooked on it originally because he bought this really nice looking hat. And I bought one the next year. And I don't know if it's a lucky hat, but I bought that Musky Maniacs hat at CanCast. The first time I wore it, I caught 3 musky in one day.
Yeah, and we went musky fishing together, and you didn't wear it that day, and I did, and I outfished you 4-0.
It was crazy. They make really cool stuff, and we're happy that they were willing to sponsor this episode. So we do have an epic musky episode for y'all today. And the reason we're doing this is because fall is the time when most musky anglers will say it is the best time of year to catch an absolute unit of a fish. Absolute giant. Well, and why is that? Well, we're going to get into that a little bit. But first, before we start, we are going to get into the interesting fishing fact. And that is going to be handled by the one and only man with a mustache, Andrew.
Good thing you didn't say man with a mustache, Seth Fighter.
Oh, because we saw him the other day at Gagnon Sports.
Yeah, I got a hat signed by him.
If you don't know who Seth Fighter is, he's probably one of the coolest professional anglers out there.
He's super chill.
Yeah, but anyway, that's another story.
All right, so interesting fishing fact this week. I know we're talking about musky fishing here, and a lot of people say that musky lures are expensive. And yeah, if you're used to buying, cotton cordels, then yeah, musky lures cost more. Especially if you get into the nice like swim baits and custom musky baits, they can get up there in price. But I was curious to know what some of the most expensive lures are. And I don't mean the one of one, complete custom lures, because those can reach into the thousands. I know, but actual production lures, how much do they cost? So I have the top 10 list. So what do you think is number 10? What price range do you think? Number 10 of the most. And I did not curate this list myself. I got it off of, it's called rarest.org, is where I took this list from. But the research that I found, I didn't see many others. It kind of surprised me. For production baits, there aren't many that are super expensive.
Yeah.
So number 10 came in. It's the original MS Slammer. And this is American prices, but it's $71.49.
Okay. I've actually seen those lures before.
Yeah.
They look pretty good. And $71, like for what that is, like, yeah, it's a bit expensive, but that's not crazy.
No, exactly.
Okay. So as we go up the list, it'll get more crazy.
Go up the list. ABT Lures, Suicide Glide, $78.99. Matt Lures, Hardgill Swim Bait, $85. Not much. We'll jump a few here. We have the Hogfather Gizzard Shad. That's $275.
Okay, getting pricey.
Yeah. We have Roman Made South Premium.
Of course.
$279.
Yep.
Roman Made Mother Swim Bait.
Yep. That's a very expensive one.
$499. This is American.
That's US, so that's like $800 Canadian.
Now, this one here, I had never heard of it before, and there's not a whole lot on YouTube about it, but it is the most expensive production glide bait ever made. It's the Manifold Niro Yugo Frame 550 glide bait.
That sounds like a fighter jet.
It's made in Japan out of horse leather.
I've seen this.
So they have the small one and they have the big one. This is the big one.
I saw that on Tackle Warehouse.
It's like 48 ounces. I'm like, just weigh it in pounds now. Like, what are you doing? So it costs. What's your guess, Jesse? What do you think it costs?
It's well over $1,000. I think it's like $1,300.
American, a little bit less. So it's $1,147.99. And it is like, it's not one of one. They've sold multiples of these. It is a production bait. It's hand stitched together. So one could make the argument it has some custom work, but it's at the same time, you don't get to choose colors. You don't get to choose that. This is what you get. Yes, it's handmade. It doesn't make it custom.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. I would never cast something like that. First of all, you can't cast that thing. It's too heavy. But then I was thinking, I also like to collect old baits. I know that some of the older baits can get quite pricey. Certain colors, certain years, depending on how it was made. So what do you think? I found another website mybaitshop.com, I had another curated list of some of the most expensive lures ever sold at auctions. So it's a list of 1 to 25. What do you think the cheapest, the 25th most expensive lure, what do you think it cost at an auction?
$2,000.
$5,100.
Dang
It was
it.
the 25th.
Wow.
The most expensive one, it is a giant, it's the giant copper Haskell minnow. It's from, I think, 1858 or 1859. And there's only one known in existence left, like that's left existing. And it sold in auction in 2003 for, well, let's get your guess.
This is the most expensive?
The most expensive one.
Oh. I'm going to say something insane. $248,000.
Oh, you're over that by $100,000.
Dang it.
It costs. It sold for $101,200.
That's crazy.
That's one bait. Like that's nuts. But that just goes to show that for me, people think that it's bougie to buy all the Japanese baits. Where meanwhile I'm picking through grandfather's tackle boxes and wanting to use some of the old baits. Maybe I'm foolish by casting these things around. I don't cast those collectibles around, trust me.
And maybe in a few years, you'll be rich from selling those baits. Who knows? And you can buy me a bass boat.
So I thought that was interesting, of the most expensive production and the most expensive ever sold. Like there's a huge difference. So if anyone's ever saying you spend too much on lures, be like, well, I could get into collecting them. Would you rather have that?
Yeah. Then we'll go bankrupt. I think a side question would be, what's the most expensive lure that you own?
I think it's probably, it's an old, I can't remember. I think it's a Fluger popper. They usually sell for about $80.
Yeah.
Again, it's a vintage bait, so that's generally what they go for an auction. Mine is in very nice condition. I don't think it was ever actually thrown in the water, but it's not in box or anything. It's got the chunky glitter, it was called, and it's by Fluger. I forget exactly the name, Pop Right or something like that.
Chunky glitter.
And it looks like it's giant like metal flecks stuck to the outside of the paint. It looks hilarious.
That is hilarious.
But I think that's probably my most expensive one. It's not crazy valuable, but I tell you, I have not spent that much money on a lure myself, new and box.
We're talking about musky this week, but generally even for musky, we were just talking about this before. We were talking about, there's this brand called Buckhorn Baits, and they have some at Gagnon Sports that are hanging up above the counter. And I've been following this guy on Instagram, and his baits are fantastic. They look amazing. Yeah. But they're about $139. And like that, to me, I said to Andrew, I'm like, I want to get one next year and just literally just fish that. Because like, if say you use one particular type of lure and you use it day in and day out, then it's better to buy one nice one that you really like for $150 than to buy 3 or 4 ones that cost $40 or $50, So really it's savings.
And was that girl math?
Yeah. Girl dinner.
There's another bait I do want to buy, which would be the most expensive bait, is the Hashimoto. I really love the mag blade and the Ono or the Shogun.
Yes.
They're pricier, but they're segmented like glide baits, but they look incredible.
Yeah. So really, you can spend a lot on fishing stuff, or you can spend a little, but that's a totally another topic we're going to cover.
Or you could spend a little bit on a bait 150 years ago and sell it for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Now Andrew's talking about making the time machine again, going back. Anyway, we're going to get back to our main topic of fall musky fishing madness. Insert fall noises. I don't know what that is. Anyway.
Crunching of leaves.
Yeah. So again, we were talking about like musky fishing in the fall. A lot of anglers that fish for musky will tell you it is the ultimate time to catch the biggest musky of the year. And why is that? Well, as the water cools, what do these fish do? Well, they start feeding up for the winter. And we ourselves, we've had pretty good success in
feeding
fall.
Up for the winter.
Yeah, feeding up for the winter too. I mean, we gain a few pounds for the winter like everyone else. But we've had some really good days. Like last year, for instance, we had a day where we had 11 follows.
Yeah, that was insane.
And
that was all before noon.
Yeah, and it was all in shallow water. So what happens is these fish come up shallow to feed up for the winter, because fish, like, they may not be intelligent, but as soon as it starts to get a little cold, they realize that winter's coming and they know they have to feed up. So we do have some tips we're going to throw in for you guys, but I thought it'd be really cool because, like, we're not musky gurus ourselves. Like, we catch musky every year. We are not pros by any means. We're just average musky anglers.
Neither of us have come close to breaking a 50. Like,
oh yeah, but hey, we also fish areas where 50s are very rare. But I thought this episode would be pretty cool, so we can have some tips that were sent to us by some local gurus.
Oh, these guys are legit.
Yeah.
Like hammers for muskie.
And they're from different areas of Ontario. One's actually from New Brunswick, and they're from all different skill levels, and they've all catch muskie every year. They're all passionate muskie anglers. So I thought we could get some tips from them. So they actually sent them in, and we're going to kind of read through them and comment on some of the tips. So I have a really good feeling that if you are looking to catch and improve your muskie fishing game this fall, these tips are 100% going to help you catch more. So we're happy to have a lot of awesome contacts that we met through Instagram, and all these guys we met through Instagram, and a lot of them have YouTube channels. So I thought we could just do a little brief introduction of these guys. So we have Jonah from Vanbeast on YouTube. He has a YouTube channel. We're going to link all this down below. So I highly recommend you give these guys a follow if you're not, and subscribe to their YouTube channels as well. So we have Jonah from Vanbeast, and he fishes a lot of St. Clair and a lot of other places, but mostly on St. Clair. We have Kory from Slump Bust Outdoors. They're on Instagram. They also have a YouTube channel as well, which is just full of awesome.
They have some great content.
And it's all Ontario content as well. Kory sent us some absolutely amazing tips.
Yep.
We have Damian from Musky Hunter Northern Edition. This guy, as we're recording now, he just posted that he caught his 57th muskie of the season.
Yeah.
Which is insane. And he fishes a lot of the Kawarthas, which is great. We also have one of our buddies, Ben, from Instagram. We'll link his page down below. And the oddball we have here, because he's not an oddball, but it's not Ontario. But
one of these is not like the other.
Yeah. So we have Nate, NB Angler, on Instagram. We'll link him down below. But he's actually from New Brunswick, and he fishes the St. John River. And he sent...
What a fishery.
Oh, he's caught some absolute tanks. But he sent us a lot of really good tips, too. So those are the 5 people that... Oh, and our sponsored Musky Maniacs. Actually,
some stuff too.
John from Musky Maniacs sent us some of his own tips, which is really fantastic. Before we get into this... just if you probably noticed, Andrew has a little bit of a cough right now. So I'm probably going to do most of the talking today just so that he doesn't cough himself to death. But he is still here, just in case you're wondering.
In case you thought, like, I wasn't here, eh?
So if you're an average angler like us, these tips will definitely help you catch more muskies this fall. So we all know muskie fishing, it has a kind of a reputation of not being easy. But if you do your homework... and apply some of these tips that we're gonna read out from you today, it'll definitely put the odds in your favor to catch either your first muskie or possibly your personal best size muskie.
Yeah, Jesse and I, we've fished the same body of water for years that we still fish to catch muskie on. Like you talk about an area like the Kawartha Lakes. How many guys fish the Kawartha Lakes but have never caught a muskie in those lakes? Those lakes are full of them. But until you do the research and actually put what you learn into action, into practice, your odds of catching them is going to be lower. Yeah. Or if they bite your line, you're not prepared for it, and it's going to cut right through that non-leadered line, so you're not going to land them. So it's all about that knowledge. And this episode and the tips we've gotten from these guys are going to make this, in my opinion, one of the best, compact, most useful information about muskie fishing that you can get.
I agree. So buckle up, start doing your push-ups so you can chuck those big baits and listen. So just before we start, we normally mention this at the end, but I'd like to mention that we do get a lot of messages from you guys about how you love the podcast. You listen to every episode. We actually get a lot of messages. People are like, we listen to every episode. We love it, all this stuff. And that's amazing. Over 2,000 people listen to this podcast at this point every single week, which is way more than we ever thought. It's amazing. And now we're at episode 30. We would like to take this time to thank some of our Patreon members. So if you're not aware what Patreon is, it's basically somewhere where you can donate a few bucks every month to help support our show. So we would like to thank our Patreon members. Special thanks to our buddy Jason, Conrad, Earthquake, and of course Wes. Thanks a lot for helping us put a dent in our expenses. So there are obviously expenses to making this weekly show. Most of that is covered by Andrew and myself. We don't want to run ads in the show because we know how annoying ads are. But if you'd like to help us cover some of the expenses, please consider donating. It's just a few bucks. As I was just saying to Andrew, if 5% of our listeners donated $2 a month, we would be able to cover all of our expenses so that we wouldn't be paying out of our pocket.
Yeah, covering our expenses. Now, I know I listen to podcasts a lot, and Jesse has been too. And sometimes like you'll hear people, oh, if you just this many subscribed, we could do this full time. That's not what we're saying.
We just want to cover the basic
this covers
costs.
the podcast expenses.
Yeah.
Is that many voted? So don't think that, well, they don't need money because they still have jobs, and that's fine.
Yes, there are monthly expenses and subscriptions that we use to edit this and keep it ad free. So definitely keep that in mind if you'd like to be one of those awesome 5% of people. Speaking of giveaways, though, Musky Maniacs is sponsoring this giveaway, and we'll tell you a little later what it is, because it's actually a surprise. It's a surprise to Andrew too, because he doesn't know. But the only way to enter is by following us on Instagram. So make sure you check out our Instagram at Average Ontario Anglers. Everything will be linked down below in the show notes. Mm-hmm. So now that all that is out of the way, let's get into this. We're gonna get started off. Like, fall's a big season. It's multiple months, obviously, so it changes a lot throughout the thing. So we're gonna kind of go through the year. So starting off with early fall tips, and we're talking right now, September. Really, September is generally what we're going to be talking about. So this is when the first...
If you're listening to this a year later, even like mid-August, depending on the year, temperatures can start to cool. Yeah. Some of these changes can start coming into effect once the water temperatures drop anything below 70, right?
Yeah, and it's going to depend, but like... Yeah, generally like late August, you're going to start seeing these changes happen, and the muskies start getting shallow. So we're going to get into that. So when the first cool down happens, generally, like Andrew said, late August, early September, how do you know when this happens? Well, usually, and I've heard a lot of muskie guys say, like when you wake up in the morning in the summer, generally you're like, okay, I can wear a t-shirt. But as soon as you start thinking about putting on a hoodie in the morning, the muskie already know that it's time to feed up. They're already slowly moving up into the shallows. So in quick summary of a general muskie movement throughout the year, and again, this is going to really depend on so many factors and what kind of lake you fish. But in late spring, usually when muskie season opens, we're going to find muskie where, Andrew?
They're still shallow. They stick around their spawning areas. So you can get them in super shallow water because they've tucked right into these weeds, up by currents and up little creeks even.
Yeah.
They're sometimes just their backs are wet and that's it.
I had an experience last year where I was canoeing this river that we fish that has muskie in it. Not big ones, but there are muskie in it with my wife. And we were kind of pushing through really shallow water. I'm talking like 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water. And we were spooking muskie like crazy. They were just sitting in super, super shallow water. So in the early spring, that's what happens. But as the water warms up, we know muskie, they don't really like warm water. Now, you can always find muskie in the weeds. People will tell you there's always muskie in the weeds. But generally speaking, the bigger fish, they slip deeper, and not super deep, but like it depends again on your body water. So like we fish a lot of the Kawartha lakes where there aren't big deep basins in the lake. So like in other places the fish may go really deep, but in some of the lakes that we fish, that just means instead of being in 3 to 5 feet of water, they drop down to 8 to 12 or 15 feet of water. So that's what happens in the summer. But when the first cool down happens, like we talked about, Andrew knows, like, where do they go?
They start to head to the shallow water again. Because, again, that's where the forage is. There's still weed growth. There's still stuff to keep all the bait fish. You go down that food chain. Everything is still happening in the shallows for all that forage. And that's exactly where the muskie are going to be going to feed up on other predatory fish or large bait fish that are in those areas. Because they're just looking to pack on as much as possible before water temperatures get super cold and they know they're going to be more sluggish.
Exactly. So, Kory from Slump Bus Outdoors, he gets us started. This is our first tip with some pre-fall muskie tips. So he says late August through mid-September, there is a pre-fall movement of larger fish from deep water to shallow structure and weed beds. When you have those cool nights or first cold front, make sure to check shallow structure. This period can be great for big blades, topwater, and big fish, which are easy to access. Be ready for some heart pumping action in shallow water. Again, we're not pros, but we've experienced this ourselves.
Yes.
Like we'll be fishing in, mid, even late September, and we're finding tons of muskie really shallow. Like, what was that big one you caught last year? How shallow was that? 4 feet?
So So the one that I caught, we were actually pushing into a channel, and it was, I say channel, it dead ended. It was just kind of like this finger stretching into a marsh area. So the surrounding area was literally just scum. It was marsh, and it went down maybe 6 feet tops in the deepest part of that channel. Yeah. We passed over this muskie and saw it when I caught it.
Yeah, I just saw it sitting in the bottom, and it was like 5 feet of water. And that day, the first one that I caught that day, it was in about 4 feet of water as well.
And the ones that we saw, we spooked them driving around. We were in 3 feet of water tops.
Yeah. So during this time, like you said, big blades, topwaters, like topwater. So I was actually musky fishing last weekend, and again, it's that time of year. It's like pre-fall. Like I know it's fall now, but like it's still not super cold yet. And I was fishing a big plopper, like a big tail rotating bait, and I actually had a muskie smoke it. It missed it. We didn't connect, but don't be afraid to chuck topwater this time of year. Even though it's it's getting a little colder, you may not think fall's the time to chuck topwater, but September is a topwater month for muskie.
Well, most of the muskie we caught when we went up north, where we recorded that other episode with Radio Voice Royce, most of the muskie we caught on that trip were on topwater.
Yep. So and shallow.
And again, we did that in early September. We went up there, I think. So
yeah.
So even that, or sorry, late August we went.
But it's still that.
It's just that time. And again, it's been a colder year this year. So when those water temperatures started to drop, the water was way colder than it normally is that time of year.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of those transitions and movements started happening a little bit earlier this year from what we found. Whether they'll continue to be early going forward, weather dependent. But it did get cold earlier.
Exactly. So we're going to get into the next tip. This is actually from Ben. Again, we're going to link everyone's description down below so you can follow them on Instagram. You want to read that one, Andrew?
Sure. So Ben says, muskie are often super shallow, having rolled out of their summer haunts. Fall offers the opportunities for anglers to catch numbers and is the best time of the year for trophy muskie hunters like myself. The nights are getting colder and the water temps are starting to drop. This is prime time to fish shallow weeds adjacent to main lake basins. Any rock and weed spots are likely to hold fish as well. Fall also has another great pattern. Fishing is extremely hot near the creeks that enter your lakes. These creeks harbor lots of bass, perch, and other species that leave the creeks to prep for winter in the deeper lakes. Fish up into the creeks as well. Often muskie push further and enter the creeks to grab an easy meal. The mouths out of the rivers and creeks often have a deep pocket where muskie will stack up and grab fish above them.
Those are some great tips, and it's pretty much like we were saying. They get super shallow, and like the word "super," like they get shallow. Like you will not expect to see like these huge muskie just sitting in literally inches of water sometimes.
Yeah,
and they're on the hunt for food.
One of the last muskie I caught, I saw it about 100 yards away. I could just see a wake moving around in the shallows, and I knew something was in there going after forage, and I sight fished it and caught that muskie. So even that is exactly what he's describing. Yeah. And muskie, we always have to remember, like we talked about before on a previous episode about them, and what you'll hear from all the pros, muskie like current. So especially river mouths, you're now combining the fact that there's current there. They like that because there's constant food that's being washed past them, and now there's a lot of food that's actually making its way down these creeks because it's wintertime. It's prime spot for muskie.
Yeah. There's so many tips. We're going to have to kind of roll through these pretty fast. So Damian from Musky Hunter Northern Edition, he actually gave us I asked him, can you send us some tips? He sent me like a full book. So this guy, legit, we appreciate all your tips, Damian. So this is some of his tips for targeting shallow fish. So he says, blades have been working for me as late as early October. Handlebars musky lures are the blades I run. He's a fellow Ontario resident near Lake St. Clair, where he guides muskie and makes lures and bump boards on the side. In early fall, blades must be reeled in very quickly over the top of weeds, which is called burning blades. You're looking for strictly reaction bites. You don't want the fish to have a second to look at the bait. You want it just to react and eat. Reeling quickly doesn't give the fish much time to think. And then he says, you'll never out-reel a muskie, so don't be scared of speed.
That's a really good tip.
It's a really good tip. We're going to break this down really quick, but notice how he says, blades have been working for me as late as early October. So oftentimes, if you I watch every single muskie information YouTube video that I can possibly watch, and a lot of people, they stop using blades as the water gets cold because it's a bait that's a little bit generally faster. You can slow roll them, but generally as the water cools, the fish are a little more sluggish. You're going to use a slower presentation. So he's saying you can still use them well into October, early October. And handlebars, we do have some of his bucktails as well. They're great. And they're not super expensive. I know a lot of people like, high-end bucktails, and, that's good. But guess what? A lot of guys still catch them on, regular handlebars that are, affordable for most average anglers. And we actually met Mike from Handlebars Lures at CanCast, and he's an interesting guy. He's super nice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell why his brand is called Handlebars, because he's a huge mustache.
And beard.
Yeah. So I was actually trying this technique on the weekend. I had a little weekend fishing trip. We did not catch any fish. The weather was terrible. But I was burning bucktails. I was burning double tens, and you just chuck them out, and you reel them as fast as you can, just right over the top of the shallow weeds. And like you said, it's a reaction bite. Just like when you're bass fishing, you just want to reel in so fast that the fish doesn't have time to look at it and be like, what is that? Because like a bucktail doesn't really look like anything.
Isn't that what the goat says? Kevin Van Dam always talks about smallmouth bass
Yeah,
fishing. You want that reaction.
Yeah.
Don't let them see it. Work that bait fast.
When he fishes a spinnerbait, he's like, just reeled in fast. You don't want them to get a good look at it. You just want them to react. So the same thing with shallow muskie. Just reel in fast. Don't be afraid. They can swim really fast. Like like you said, there's no way you can reel in too fast that a muskie's like, I can't catch up. Like, what kind of gear ratio you have on your reel there? Like 100 to 1? So anyway, Andrew, why don't you read the next tip? This is actually from Ben.
Yep. So he says, fall means big baits. When that water is between 70 and 60, topwater can be hard to beat. I have caught lots of musky topwater in fall using tail prop baits like the Top Raider. He says he likes to upsize both hooks one size. Another great tip. Another great bait is the Suic Weagle, or another musky size walk the dog bait. Working these annoyingly slow in an area where you expect to see a big fish is deadly, or coming back to a fish. Of course, bucktails are good, but particularly big blades. These big blades move a lot of water, and the bigger profile is key. I favor a single 9, double 10s, and double 13s.
Yeah, so again, we're talking the typical musky baits that all these guys are throwing is big bucktails. And I bought a few double 10s this year just because that's what everyone's telling me. Like I had everyone has a whole bunch of double 8s, like, single 8s, 7s, So I bought 2 double 10s, and they
pull.
They pull. They're hard to pull in, but they throw off so much disturbance in the water.
Yeah.
And you're trying to attract these fish, make them react, but you're wanting to attract them and let them know that this is a big meal.
Yes.
I'm not saying you can't use smaller baits this time of year. Andrew's caught some of his biggest muskie in the fall on small baits. That being said, generally speaking, most muskie guys will tell you in the fall is the time when you want to throw big baits. Big fish are going to be like, hey, that's worth my time to actually swim up to that and eat it.
Exactly. It expends energy to feed. So for them, they have that whole balance that they need to make sure that the energy they're using up is not going to be too much to get that big bait that's going, or that big food that's going to then give them stockpiles of energy reserves for over the course of winter.
Exactly. And like Ben said as well, topwater is a huge player in the fall. Mm-hmm. As long as the water's not too cold. I've heard a lot of muskie guys say, though, you can catch, a muskie on a topwater as long as there's no ice on top of the water. So, like, don't be afraid to chuck them. If the conditions look good, just chuck them. So we're actually going to have a tip now from Nate, which is NB Angler from New Brunswick. Yep. So he has some of his favorite lures that he likes in the fall. And some of his favorite lures is he likes a black and nickel 8-9 stagger blade by Musky Frenzy, a Chaos Tackle white Medusa, and a white Rapala X-Rap saltwater slash bait. So when he's casting, he has a typical big bucktail, a Medusa, a big rubber bait, and then he has a Rapala slash jerk bait kind of deal. Yep. We talked a bit about your baits. You got your baits now. So, you got some topwater, you got some big bucktails. We were talking earlier about fishing baits like, big rubber, like Medusas, big swim baits, stuff like that. You're generally looking for big baits. Again, yes. You can use smaller stuff, but you have your baits. What are you supposed to expect when you go fishing? This is you have your gear, you have your bait. What do you expect? So we actually have some tips from Damian.
This is really good.
These are good tips. Yeah. So like I said, you got your stuff, you're out fishing. What are you supposed to expect? Why don't you read the first tip?
So he says, fish will generally hit a bait in the first 5 cranks of your reel or the last 5 cranks of the reel. So getting your lures started right away is major. You don't want to throw something like blades or topwater out and have it sit there or sink slowly for a second. That will turn a nearby muskie right off of biting. And also being prepared as much as possible for a boat side attack. We all get tired and lazy boat side, but one must fight the pain to reap the rewards of a once in a blue moon boat side attack. It sucks when one follows in and you weren't prepared.
That's happened to me so many times. Happened. It happens to every muskie guy.
My second muskie was actually right in the figure 8, textbook perfect. And it was incredible. Like when you get those, that's the most exciting strikes you get.
It's true. And I botched so many figure eights last year. Because again, we're just getting into musky fishing the last few years, and like figure eighting, it seems simple, but as you do it throughout the day, you get lazy and your technique's not good, and you have a muskie come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You're always like, oh, you're going to see them following. Doesn't
Nope.
happen. Sometimes they come from underneath the boat. Sometimes they shoot in from the side fast. And as you're pulling your lure up, all of a sudden the muskie's there, and you try to drop your lure in a figure eight, they're gone.
Yep.
So you really have to textbook do it every single cast figure eight, because a lot of the fish, like you said, you either hook them as soon as your lure hits the water and you retrieve, or right when you're about to pull it out of the water. So don't get lazy. Always have polarized sunglasses on and be checking the water, and
Yes.
keep your rod, and always do a figure eight or at least a big loop or an L at least at the minimum. So those are some great tips. And again, it's true. You get tired and lazy. You're checking these big baits, and you're just like,
it gets rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nate from NB Angler, he gives us 3 tips. And I think that these particular tips, they really apply for fall fishing for muskies. So I'll just read these quick. So he has this tip called PMA. And I was like, what the heck? Positive musky attitude. I'm not sure if he made this up, but he said, these fish are known to haunt your thoughts and mood when things are not going right. Stick with it. This juice is worth the squeeze. I agree. Muskie really do get in your head, because you're fishing for a fish that, again, there's not a lot of them in the
There's
lake.
a good chance you won't see one all day, but you have to work at it as if the next cast or that cast is the one that produces.
Yeah.
It's mentally fatiguing on top of being physically exhausting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
It's
you're
a lot.
usually fishing in tough conditions. And me and Andrew, one thing that I like that we do when we're fishing, oftentimes we'll be casting and I'll be like, all right, this cast.
Yeah.
And he'll be like, oh, this cast.
You got to keep yourself
this cast.
positive.
There's going to be one.
And people, I know there's going to be people listening to this where if you're listening to this, you're interested in fishing to some extent. And you're going to hear us saying, oh, you get tired musky fishing? How is it that bad? It's like, you start casting these, 12-ounce baits on a heavy rod, like all day long, you're going to feel it in your shoulders. Like, it is musky anglers who target muskie constantly. They're a different breed.
Yes.
Like, they can
insane.
put up with the worst of weather, the worst, like the heaviest equipment. And the fact that they can do it all day is amazing. And if you think we're being, wimps by us saying that, go try it and see how you feel the next day.
Yeah. And you'll do all this and put in all this hard work
and get skunked.
and generally not catch a lot of fish. So something drives you to do it, but we're going to get into that. His second tip is stay focused. These fish have a way of showing up when you least expect. You don't want to miss a chance, as it could be your only one for hours or even days. And it's true. We kind of talked about that. Like, you have to, you got to do the figure eight. You got to have your sunglasses on and constantly be watching the water behind your bait. Because like I said, I just came back from a 2-day muskie trip. Nothing.
Yeah.
Am I disappointed? No, like, that's muskie fishing. I don't expect to catch 10 every day. If I can catch 1 or 2 big ones a season, that would be amazing. You know? So definitely stay focused. And again, it's hard. One recommendation, bring some coffee.
Yep.
Especially on those cold days.
Yeah. When you can, take a break from casting and you find a spot to troll, that's when you sit down, you have a lunch, have some good food, have some nice hot coffee. It'll help make the day, not be
as terrible.
Yeah.
His last tip in this section is like what we talked about. You need a good set of polarized sunglasses. Keep your eyes behind your bait on retrieve and do not stop reeling if you see a fish falling.
That's so hard.
It's
in
very
fact,
hard.
a lot of pros say speed up.
Yes.
If you see a fish, speed up.
Yes.
You want to trigger that
You
strike.
want to trigger the strike. That's why the figure eight works so good, because
Yep.
you're basically taking the bait away from the fish, and then
Yeah.
they just start going into predatory mode and just start chasing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris Hansen comes out. He's like, predator. So anyway, we're going to keep rolling here. So that's kind of like, early fall.
Mm-hmm.
As the water cools, as we talked about, fish generally start to slink back into deeper water.
And that often happens with colder water. And another kind of side thing with that is because of the colder water temps, the plants, the aquatic vegetation starts to die. That releases a lot of carbon dioxide into the water, and all the bait fish, they move away.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a dead area when the plants start to rot. So there's nothing there to hold muskie. So even if the weeds, they're starting to rot, there's a lot of CO2 in the water. You're not seeing any bait fish, not seeing anything else. Guess what? The muskie aren't there either.
Yeah. The muskie are always where the food is.
Yes.
And there is this time when, after that, once that all dissipates, the muskie will come shallow again if the bait fish are up. But there is a time when the weeds start rotting, and you won't find anything.
During that rotting
dead.
phase, it's dead.
Yeah, it's dead. You'll have days where like you'll go fish the shallows one week and you see tons of fish, and you'll go back 2 weeks later and there's nothing there. It's like a ghost town. So you got to switch locations. So we're going to kind of talk about that. So this time of year when the water is colder, it's getting cold, the fish, they have to really start fattening up for the winter. And this is when literally the big baits come out. Like these fish are like, it's winter's coming. Like you can tell there's frost in the morning. These fish are like, we need to eat a lot of food. But the problem is fish are cold-blooded. So their metabolism is slowing down. So we have some tips here about fishing this time of year. Now, Andrew's going to read this one. Damian of Musky Hunter Northern Edition. He has some tips for lures that are effective this time of year.
He says, tossing big rubber, working the outside edges of the remaining weed beds right near deep water. Rubber baits like Magnum Bulldogs, Red October tubes, large Medusas. I'm a big fan of dark-colored bait. Big fish will come up from the depths of the edges to feed. My method of retrieving rubber is the pull pause method, and 90% of the time, the fish will hit on the slack or the pause. It's crucial to reel in your slack quickly between pulls. That way you feel anything abnormal happening, because most of the time, all you feel is a small tick, similar to just a small fish pecking at it. But set the hook and hold on.
I love fishing big rubber, and I just got onto it like this year. I started fishing Medusas this year. I bought one a few years ago, and I just didn't have any confidence in it. I know they're popular, but I personally never caught anything on it. But this year, I literally went out and I was like, I'm going to catch something on this. And I had a day where I caught 3 in one day on a Medusa. I had a day where I went out with Andrew and my nephew, and I chucked that thing all day just to get one muskie. But they crush big rubber, especially this time of year. You have to think, some of these rubber baits, like we were just at Gagnon's the other day, some of these rubber baits, like they have the Bulldog Pounder. It weighs a pound. And people are like, no one chucks those. Tons of guys chuck those because they work. I'm not saying in some bodies of water that may be extreme overkill. Like some of the lakes we fish, like the Kawarthas, you may not see a lot of anglers chucking the pounders, but they're chucking the Magnums. And the Magnums are 8 or 9 ounces, no problem. So if you notice,
and when he says set the hook, he means set the hook. When you are using big rubber baits, the musky teeth bite into it, and then now you're not just trying to pull like a smooth hard bait through teeth. When you set the hook, you have to rip this bait through their teeth, so it's going to cut your bait up. That's expected in order to get those hooks to actually penetrate in. So when you have to set this hook, there's a lot that's fighting, that's kind of running against you, just because the teeth of the muskie are actually into the bait itself. So when you set the hook, you lean back and you set that hook.
And we're going to talk, there's another tip about the kind of gear you need to actually throw these baits. But like you said, Magnum Bulldogs, Red October tubes, large Medusas. Bulldogs, classic. They're just, you can buy them at almost any fishing store that you can go to. Red October tubes. Another tube that we like is the Water Wolf tubes. Made by Mike at Water Wolf Lures. The Gator tubes. They come in all different sizes. Me and Andrew picked up a bunch. I was actually fishing again on the weekend that I got skunked. But one thing that I did appreciate for that weekend is I was fishing with our buddy Paul, and we were just trying different baits all day. Like it was slow. We knew the fishing was sucky, but I was like, let's try some bait. We were just going through a Tacklebox, just trying baits. And I had some tips actually from Kory from Slump Bus Outdoors about how to fish a tube properly. He was messaging me, and I was really trying that. And I found that even in that one day of just practicing fishing the tube, I really improved 100%. Like how I was fishing. I was fishing it all wrong, which is great. That's why we have tips from these guys. But anyway, we're going to go to the next tip, which is Jonah from Vanbeast. Vanbeast fishing. Again, check out this guy's YouTube channel. He has a YouTube video I'm just going to mention quickly. It's like 5 top baits, rubber baits for fishing St. Clair. I just watched it today actually, and he mentions a bunch of baits. He also has a video on how to make a musky tackle box out of a lunch bag from Walmart. Very budget. Really, really good video.
Nice.
So anyway, his tip is for this time of year, fishing fall. He says most important is the slow roll. The slower you can crawl a lure, the better, especially the later it gets in the season. With so much bait in the river, you want the lure to move a bit slower than the bait so the muskies can key in on it. So we're talking we were talking before about late summer, early fall. The fish they're pretty active because the water temp's still in the 60s. But as soon as the water gets cold, the metabolism goes down. So you need to really slow your bait down. Kory from Slump Bus Outdoors, he adds a similar tip. So why don't you read that one, Andrew?
It says, slow your roll. Fall brings cooler water and slowed musky metabolism. Although they are putting the feed bag on, they do not want to work as hard for their meals. Upsize your baits and slow your presentation down. Slow rolling straight retrieve baits and longer pauses and slower sweeps on pull pause presentation will trigger those fat muskies to eat.
Yeah, so again, we're talking a lot about slowing your bait. And that may change what kind of bait you normally use. Like maybe you're fishing, again, like we said, bucktails are great. Mm-hmm. Everyone catches fish on bucktails. You can slow roll a bucktail for sure. But as the water gets cold, a bucktail maybe is not the best option because it can't be retrieved as slow as other baits.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of what we were talking before about burning blades over the top for the reaction bite. Now you're doing the opposite. It's like reel them as slow as possible so the blades are just barely spinning. And these fish, they're lazy. The water temperature's low. Like it's not their fault. They're cold-blooded animals. They have no choice but to be slower this time of year. But we actually have a tip from our podcast sponsor, John at Musky Maniacs. And he added this. He said, early fall, I find fish start to slow down. Bucktails and spinnerbaits will still catch fish, but if you're having trouble finding them, switch to rubber, tubes, and bulldogs, or pull pause style bait like a suic or a dive and rise bait. In the fall, you really need to work a spot. Don't just buzz by it once and move on. Slowly work your way into a few passes, change bait styles, and you'll land more fish. So that's a really good tip. Where you're saying like, yeah, you can use bucktails and spinnerbaits in the fall, even if it's really cold. But if it's not working for you, try rubber. That's what all these guys are saying.
And fish the same spots, but try different stuff. Like pick it apart.
Yeah. So if there's again, one of the areas that me and Andrew fish a lot, there are some deep holes that we fish. And that time of year when it gets a little colder, if you can get those spots, it's better to fish those spots where you know you have a high chance of catching a muskie in those spots and pick it apart slowly, try different baits, come back at different times of the day, than to just randomly cover water where there possibly isn't a lot of fish. Mm-hmm. So definitely do that. He said, don't just buzz by a spot. Like if you get a spot, fish it thoroughly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot of tips about slowing down, which is amazing, because a lot of people think like, oh, muskie, they're just voracious beasts that'll chase anything. It's like, that is true sometimes, but in the fall when the water's cold, they want things that are slow. So why is it so important for baits to go slow? We kind of talked to this before, but we always hear about fish, they're eating up for the winter. So you might think, oh, they're going to be aggressive. They're going to be, searching down for food and eating as much as possible. But they're not, because their metabolism shuts down. Mm-hmm. So as Kory mentioned, the fish's metabolism slows down. They're cold-blooded, like we mentioned, so their energy is impacted by the temperature. So they do want to eat, obviously, but they become sluggish. They have no choice. So that's why big baits and lures get the nod, because they're worth the effort for the fish to move. They're less likely to move for something small. So imagine this muskie sitting at the bottom, and it's like, I got to eat up for winter, and a little tiny sunfish swims by. It's like, not worth the effort. Mm-hmm. But then all of a sudden it sees like a 2-pound walleye that's like, swimming like gimpy swimming by, and he's like, oh, there's an easy meal that's slowly moving by, and I can digest that like for a whole day. It's worth my while. That's why the bigger baits really get the nod.
Yeah, it's like you just had a great dinner at a wedding, and you look like, oh, there's a dessert table, like, oh, like they have like a cookie for everyone. Like, am I gonna get up and comfortable? But then you're like, oh, by the way, we just cut the cake, and here's like a bunch of like slices. You're like, oh, I'm getting up for that.
Yeah, it's worth your while.
It's worth your while.
So anyway, these are great tips. Like I've learned a lot from these guys. I'm really happy that they gave us so much. I was just like, oh, I expecting them to give a few tips, but like
there's so much here.
We could write a book about this now. So now we're going to talk about tips on finding muskie this time of year. We're going to kind of buzz through this quick because this podcast is it's getting pretty long. You're not complaining if you like muskie fishing though. So Damian from Musky Hunter Northern Edition, who is a beast of fishing. Like he's not Vanbeast, that's the other guy, but he's a beast in himself. So his tips is time on the water equals knowledge.
Before you get rewarded for your effort, you have to take the time to gain experience.
Exactly. So these guys are giving you some tips now. So
yep.
Time on the water is knowledge, but this podcast is also knowledge.
Yes.
So his other tips are, he said, fish prime time hours, morning and evenings, but also full moon and new moon. Majors and minors definitely have proven to be when the bite windows will open up the best. So very briefly, if you're not familiar with this, muskie, they bite, but they generally mostly bite during certain times. Like their bite window will be when, the moon rise or the moon set, or during these prime times. You can find all this information online when the moon rise and the moon set is. I remember last year, Andrew caught a muskie and I caught a muskie. And then that day I looked at the moon phases, and we weren't even paying attention to it at that day. But both muskies we caught were like during those time periods.
Mm-hmm.
So like it can make a big difference. So if you're fishing an area and you know there's a spot, you're like, this is a really good spot. Make sure you're on that spot during one of the rises, like the moon rise or the moon set.
And people who think that, oh, it's a bunch of malarkey,
It's not.
There have been arguments made for both sides of like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. However, musky anglers are some of the best anglers for actually keeping record of everything.
Yeah.
And they can show you the actual records of, I caught this fish, it was this size, I caught it here, this date, this is the moon cycle during that time. And there's actually been people who've compiled the information to show that there is, it's not night and day, but there is an improvement even in the statistics themselves of fishing those times of day.
Yeah, 100%.
You didn't want that to come out of your mouth, but it did.
And I 100%. I was like, I got to stop halfway through saying this, but I just kept going. But I 100% agree with the whole moon phase thing. It does make a difference. His next tip, it may not be something that you've done yet, but if it is, he said hiring a guide or fish with a friend that's knowledgeable with muskies, or fish with a fellow fisherman that's local to the lake and are interested in targeting muskies. There will be nothing more educational than getting out and fishing with someone that has experience. You soak in so much knowledge in a short period that would normally take you basically a lifetime to figure out.
Yeah.
Which we actually talked about hiring a muskie guide this fall. It just didn't work out for us just because we're poor. But if you can hire a guide, there are a phenomenal amount of guides in the Kawarthas. Like, we're gonna give a shout out. Like, I've never used him personally. I've talked to a few people that used him. Bobby Belmonte from 2B Fishing.
Yeah.
He is he fishes a lot of lakes, but the Kawarthas, if you fish the Kawarthas, he is a muskie guy. A lot of guides, like, they fish bass and then they also fish muskie. Bobby does that, and he's a hammer.
Well, we need to preface this. Bobby, we hear he's good. If you want us to give an actual, review of if what you think, then just take us out there. But
there's also
he is good though.
Goat angling.
Yes.
He fishes muskie a lot. Yeah. There's Kawartha angling charters. I forget the guy. The guy catches a lot of muskie. There's a lot of guides in the Kawarthas, and again, you can learn so much. And not muskie related, but I'll tell you. One time I was steelhead fishing, and like, I've been steelhead fishing my whole life. But I went out with this guy who's a hammer, an absolute hammer. And I fished with him for 4 hours. And I learned so much from this guy in 4 hours. Just little things. Like, I was doing the same thing as him, but he was doing little extra things and fishing spots that I would normally not have fished. And I learned so much just from that thing. So that's the same thing. If you can't hire a guide, go with someone that's experienced. Mm-hmm. You'll learn a lot. If you just go out into a big lake and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go catch a muskie. Where do I start?
Yeah.
It's so intimidating.
Have fun.
If you pay, guides may be expensive, but if you pay a guide, maybe you go once or twice a year, or even once a year, you can learn so much that would have took you years to figure out by yourself. So, and these guys, like, a lot of people are like, guides help you catch fish. They do, but think of it as a guide will educate you on how to catch fish yourself.
Yep.
You're not just paying to fish their spots.
You pick their brain with questions, they'll talk to you all day.
Exactly.
You get a lot for it.
So that is one thing about fishing with a guide. If you want to do that, I'd highly recommend it.
Another tip from Nate there is also, first things first, he says, setting your expectations for an outing. These are apex predators, and population density will be spread out much more than other sport fish. With that in mind, you will get chances if you spend time on the water.
And that's true, like we said, like, say, like, per
fish
acre.
Fish of 10,000 casts.
Yeah, per acre, there may be, like, I don't know, 100 bass in this acre. There's one muskie.
Yeah.
So just the fact that there's a lot less of them, your chance of catching one, like, statistically, is going to be a lot lower than if you fish for a different species. So you have to just, like Andrew said, just keep casting. They say it's the fish of 10,000 casts. For me, it seems like 20,000 sometimes. But, 100%. I agree. So where do you find these fall muskie? Now, I've heard from many experienced musky anglers that I've talked to that there are muskies in the shallow weeds much later than you would think. But generally speaking, the majority of muskie head deeper as the water gets cold. Mm-hmm. I was watching a YouTube video where they were tagging muskie with like GPS chips, and they were like oh, throughout the year, this is where they are. And even in November, they were finding fish in like 3-4 feet of water. So if, say, you're fishing out of a small boat or a kayak, and that's all you have, and you're fishing a bigger lake, and you're like, I only feel comfortable fishing on the shoreline, and it's later in the season, you can still catch them shallow. There's probably not as many fish, but don't view it as an impossibility. You can still catch them shallow. There just may not be as many fish as in the deeper areas.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about when it's getting cold.
Yes.
Insert cold effects. So Kory from Slump Bus Outdoors, he has a tip. Why don't you read that, Andrew?
The cold never bothered me anyway.
I had some requests for Andrew never to sing again, so we're going to cut that out.
Right. So Kory says, as fall transitions and the water temperature cools, start to look for secondary break lines and fish that have transitioned to their wintering locations. Remember, bait is king. Muskies need the extra weight to make it through the winter. To find muskies, you need to find the bait. Once it's found, stick with the bait. Muskies will be around, and it may only be a matter of time until the fish will begin to bite.
That's a great tip. So like we're talking about where these fish are this time of year. And again, it's going to depend really on the type of lake that you're in. There's so many different lakes. Like there's shield lakes. There's lakes like we fish a lot of like shallow, weedy lakes. And there may not be huge, deep, break lines and stuff. You got to find out, depending on the body of water that you're on, where these fish are.
And that's a great tip for any species, any time of year is if you're having trouble locating them, think of the food chain. Go to where the bottom of the food chain is. Everything else is going to that point. Exactly.
And he talks about secondary break lines. So a lot of people, they may not know what a break line is. So basically a break line in very basic terms is if you're looking at like a topographic map of the lake, like the depth, anywhere where it gets shallow and then basically there's a drop off. And a lot of times along the shoreline, there'll be like a nice drop off. So it'll be like, 3-4 feet. And then all of a sudden, boom, it drops down to 12. Yeah, that's a break line. If it's like, you're talking later fall when it's cold, these fish don't want to be super shallow because the temperature is crazy up there. Like it can change so rapidly. If they want to get shallow, because they're on a break line, all they have to do is just swim up the cliff. Like basically it's like an underwater cliff. They swim up the cliff a bit and then they're shallow. But hey, if they want to drop down deep, they can easily drop down deep again.
Yeah.
So generally when you hear about people trolling, they're trolling along break lines.
Yeah. Fish don't like to travel in general.
Especially when it's cold.
They can. Over the year, they can move around a lake. But generally speaking, they'll stay close. And like you said, especially when it's cold, they like to stick to like very specific areas.
Yeah.
They want their food close by. They want their living space close by.
Exactly. So in the fall, like Kory said, these fish are on break lines, secondary break lines, and they're looking for food. Jonah talks about baits and lure colors. This is Vanbeast. Again, he has some really cool YouTube videos about that as well. So why don't you cover that, Andrew?
He says, typically bright colors work well in the fall on Lake St. Clair. For the same reason as number one, with all the bait fish, you want your lure to stand out in the crowd of bait so muskies can key in on it. There are days when more natural colors work, like when there's high water visibility. Colors I would recommend: ball liquor, which is black, orange, and white; fire tiger, which has been his number one producer for the last couple of years; clown, all white, or any variation of white, like white perch. Lures I would recommend are the Rover's Baits Flutter Shad, Water Wolf Lures Shadzilla, Restless Riders, Sebile, Berkeley Magic Swimmers, and Chaos Tackle, Medusa, or Poseidon.
Yeah, so you can see like he's talking about it basically like we were saying, big rubber baits like Medusas, which is basically like, what did you describe it before? As like a weird alien eel, like just some weird, they're the weirdest looking baits ever with all these flappy tails coming off them, but they catch fish.
Yep.
And I'd have to say one of my favorite colors of Medusas is black.
Yeah.
Black and orange.
But like you said, on Lake St. Clair, the light colors work really well for them. So again,
it depends.
This is a
where
tip
you fish.
from a local angler to Lake St. Clair. Use that to your advantage. And in the Kawarth areas, we find dark colors work better.
Yep, for sure. So we're going to add to Ben talks about some of his favorite baits. So he says fall is also amazing for jerk baits, big rubber, Medusas, shallow husky Medusas, 10 to 14 inch dive and rise baits like Suix or the Kodiak Navin. Adding and removing bell sinkers to unweighted Suix is a great modification with a pair of split ring pliers. Gliders, like glide baits, can also shine in the fall. Remember to slow down and maintain your depth, and make sure to count your baits if you're casting. So again, he mentions big rubber. All these guys are mentioning big rubber. That's probably, in my opinion, if I was going to fish in the fall, big rubber, if I was casting, that would be my number one thing.
Yeah.
And I'd be chucking. But he also talks about a dive and rise like a Suic or a Navin, and big. He's talking like 14 inches, but like 10 inches. It's like we have some pretty big suics, but compared to some of these bigger ones, like they're not big at all. I think I have a whole bunch of 9-inch suics and a 10-inch bobby bait, but like they have suics that are 14 inches long, and it may be that size of lure is, something you wouldn't chuck most of the time during the year, but in the fall you want a big bait that's just, slowly gliding down. And he mentions about adding weight, which helps the bait get deep, but also as you're using a dive and rise, as you jerk it down and it dives down, it'll really slowly float up to the surface.
Yes.
So it's not going to rise fast, because like I was fishing a suic last weekend. They rise pretty fast.
If you can get the slow rise suics as well. Yeah. But you can also just add a bell sinker to the one that you already have.
Exactly. Like a lot of the more expensive dive and rises, they have like weight systems that you screw in. But if you don't, we've been doing that for years. Like we've been putting bell sinkers on a lot of our baits. Yep. Just put it on the split ring and you're good. It'll get deeper.
And that point he made too, when you're casting to count down the baits, is if you're using something heavy, let's say you're in 10 feet of water, you want to fish that bottom 3 feet with your bait, then drop bait down, see how long it takes, count it down. Maybe it takes 7 seconds to sink 10 feet, depending on the bait you're using. So when you cast out, count 6 seconds. You're in that bottom 3 feet, and work that bait in from there. But make sure that every cast you're waiting for it to reach that depth before you start working it in, or else you're fishing empty water.
Exactly. And Kory from Slump Bus Outdoors, he actually comes in clutch with a killer tip for this very type of fishing that we're talking about. Why don't you read that, Andrew?
It says lower gear ratio can help to naturally slow your retrieve while providing the power needed for bigger baits. Extra heavy or extra heavy rods will give you the backbone needed to set the hooks on big baits. These upgrades will allow you to keep casting big baits with less fatigue.
Yeah, so like we were mentioning before about the gear you need to chuck these big baits. And not even massive baits, but like I have an extra heavy rod that I use. It sounds, if you're not into musky fishing, you're going to be like, that's a pool cue. It's not.
Yeah. And the weight rating on musky rods is different than the weight rating on bass rods. Oh, yeah. So an extra heavy musky rod is like a quadruple extra heavy flipping stick for bass. Like it's insane.
Exactly. But like even an extra heavy musky rod, that's not a bait. That's not a rod you're going to be chucking the really big rubber on. The guys are chucking, like you said, extra heavy, triple extra heavy. It depends really on the body of water you're fishing. Like in the Kawarthas, you may not be chucking the pounders like we were saying, but on Lake St. Clair, you are.
Yeah.
You are.
You are.
So really the rod's going to depend on that. But like he said, I like his tip on lower gear ratio. I've been doing this for years. I'm a fast reeler.
Yes.
Especially when I'm bass fishing, when I'm chucking chatterbaits, I like a slow reel. I like a 6-1-1. I don't want a 7 or an 8 because I reel too fast. And when you reel too fast, your bait gets higher in the water column. So when you want your bait to go really slow, especially in the fall when you're musky fishing, especially on those long days when you're not really paying attention, if you have a slower reel, it'll just help the bait stay deeper where the fish are. That's a great tip.
Even to the slower gear ratio, fishing earlier in the year, because we didn't talk about it then, but when you're fishing big, double tens or big bucktails,
you need it.
The slower gear ratio is just, it's so much less fatiguing on your wrist to be reeling that in, because again, it's acting more like a winch pulling that bait through the water.
Yeah, so much torque.
Yeah.
And I actually just got a ProRex 5-3-1 for my bucktail rod. And I was chucking double tens, and it makes a huge difference because my other reel's a 7-1-1 or whatever.
Yep.
And it's great for like pull pause baits, rubber, stuff like that. But I was trying to pull in double tens, and I'm like, wow, this is hard. And these aren't even big blades. Like some guys, like Ben was saying, he pulls double 13s.
Yeah.
So I got the 5-1 or 5-3-1, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So that's good. It's also good, like Kory said, for fishing baits just a little bit deeper in the fall. So we're gonna kind of whiz through the trolling.
Okay.
Because we're already overtime, but this is amazing tips.
Trolling has to be said.
Yeah, so when the water gets really cold in Ontario, like you can troll when it's snowing.
Yeah.
Like muskie will still bite. As long as the season isn't closed, you can fish for them. But when the water gets really cold, many people start trolling to cover water and find deep water fish. Like we said, they like to hang down deep on these break lines. So casting, you can still catch them.
It gets tough to cast in cold temperatures. You're fishing at like 0 degree temperatures or -2 degree temperatures.
It's a lot more
manageable. Your thumb stops working.
Yeah, it's a lot more manageable. So why don't you read the first tip from Ben about trolling?
He says, troll between 2.5 to 3.2 miles per hour. Typically during fall, bigger cranks like 14-inch jakes or 13-inch grandmas are great and widely available. Slam or tackle makes solid baits I like as well. Troll and cover water. Find your bait. Use side imaging and mapping to your advantage.
Yeah, so notice he said troll between 2.5 and 3.2 miles an hour. That may sound fast. It's not. Generally, even during the summer, guys are trolling 3, 5, 6 miles an hour. Muskie like it fast in the summer. So like this is basically, the speed is it's slow. It's pretty slow for musky. And big crankbaits, like 14-inch jakes, 13-inch jakes, grandmas. I remember last year we bought some 9-inch grandmas thinking they were big. And all these guys were like, why'd you buy the small one? I was like, what do you mean? This is huge. So we may have to pick up, I picked up some 10-inch jakes.
Yeah.
I feel like for our bodies of water, that's fine. But you can definitely get away with using like 14-inch baits.
I need to get a couple more bigger baits.
Yeah. And again, we have side imaging on our boat, and it is really good for helping you find these like areas to troll through and finding like rock piles and these break lines. So Kory from Slump Outdoors, again, check out Kory's YouTube channel. It's him and his dad and someone else, and they just post all their fishing videos of like where they're fishing, and they fish all over Ontario, and they catch tons of fish. It's insane. Almost like makes me want to snap my rod over my knee. I'm like, oh, these guys are slamming them. Then I go out and get skunked. I'm like, yay. But anyway, check out Kory. I'll link everything down in the show notes. But he says, when trolling, utilize planer boards. If you're trolling a deep break line, you can use a planer board to run a line on structure while keeping your boat and second one positioned on the deeper break. When trolling, study your dive chart on crankbaits so that you're effectively fishing the water column. Position your baits accordingly to where you're seeing the bait. So if you're not familiar with planer boards, we're not going to get into that, but I definitely recommend watching a YouTube channel on that, because it just helps you spread out your baits as you're trolling, so they're not directly behind the boat. So what he's saying is just make sure you can cover,
you're covering the shallows and you're covering the deep.
Yeah, which is a great tip. And this is a really good tip he says about the trolling, the dive charts. Now, if you're wondering where you can get these, if you download the Musky 360 app, there's an app, and they have a lot of baits where they will tell you like, hey, this particular bait, you click on it and it'll say, you want it to get 50 feet down, or not 50 feet down. If you want it to get down 10 feet, you have to let out 50 feet of line. It'll tell you pretty much that. So if you have a line counter reel, you can pretty much let out the correct amount of line that it will help you get the bait down to where you need it to go.
And it's even it's exact to the point where this lure exactly, this much line out, this thickness of line,
this speed,
this line diameter at this speed will go this deep.
Yeah. And it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's going to give you a good starting point. So say you're trolling through like a, break line, and it's 16 feet deep, and the muskies are, near the bottom. Again, you always want to have your bait above the muskie. Generally, that's what I hear. You can bang into rocks and stuff too. But if you want to get your bait down, like say 10 feet, you just look up the dive chart on the particular lure you have and be like, okay, I need to let out 62 feet of line, and it'll get the bait down 10 feet at this speed. And it'll really help you, because if you just chuck your bait behind the boat and you don't know where it is, like, it could be running 2 feet under the surface. It could be banging into the bottom, snagging. So the dive charts are a huge thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to get into a tip from Nate here about trolling. So why don't you read that?
This is one of the best options to cover water and locate fish, is to troll. Use your electronics and look for schools of baitfish, especially into the late fall. Points of islands, shoals, deep weed beds, and man-made structures like bridges are always high percentage areas for contacting a fish. Don't be scared to make multiple passes if you're seeing fish on electronics. My top 3 trolling lures: 8-inch Jake, black and silver; Rapala Super Shad Rap in any baitfish color; oversized musky spinner baits, preferably black and orange.
Yeah. So I like this tip because he's talking about making multiple passes, kind of like what John from Musky Maniacs said earlier. Like when you find a good spot, fish it.
Yeah.
Like don't just be like, I went by once, there was nothing there. Sometimes these muskie are so sluggish, they won't move 5 feet.
Yeah.
So you may have to troll by it and literally get the bait right in front of it.
You know what? You keep seeing the same ads on your phone when you're scrolling through Instagram or TikTok. It's because they're trying to get you. They know they're not going to get you in the first ad, but if they show you 100, maybe you'll buy something. Fish are the same way. You need to keep putting that presentation in front of them over and over again.
Yeah. Now, Damian, this is a really long tip. I'm going to whiz through it really quick, but this is a really
Speed
good
reading.
Tip. Yeah, ready?
He's going to sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Did you learn anything? Just kidding. Okay. So Damian, the Musky Hunter Northern Edition, he says this. He says, for trolling, Navionics is key. Now, if you're not familiar with Navionics is, it's basically an app. I think it's made by Garmin. Anyway, it's an app that you can download onto your phone, and it basically gives you all of the depth charts on your phone. And it's amazing. It's great for ice fishing. It's great for regular fishing. You can find, shoals, break lines, everything you need to find. Anyway, he says, Navionics is key. The way I do it is I run Navionics on my cell phone that I'm able to use my graph for down imaging and side imaging instead of having the mapping going on the graph. So instead of buying 2 graphs like a rich person, he's like, I'll use my phone, which I already have, which is great, and then use his fish finder for the other things. He said, this is a tip. He purchased a cup holder phone mount from Canadian Tire, and it holds his phone. That way he can drive and not have to worry about trying to hang on to it the whole time. So you don't want to like lose your phone in the lake, of course. Yep. And it works great. And if you're like me and you have to use your phone for mapping, I highly recommend buying the phone holder. Also recommend buying a battery booster if you're going to do this, because running Navionics all day will kill your cell phone battery. So having lots of battery power on the water is important. I usually bring a couple of battery packs just in case. It does literally suck the battery because you're using like GPS.
Yeah.
He says, location for me during the fall time is definitely deep. And again, this is going to depend where this guy fishes, but take these tips and apply them to your own lake. He said, I like to keep my baits roughly 17 to 18 feet down almost all the time. So again, if we did that on the lake we fished, it would be 3 feet underneath the muck at the bottom. So anyway, he says, I'm working shoreline structure as close as I can, zigzagging in and out of contour lines on the Navionics. Don't be scared to hit rocks with your baits once in a while, because that can sometimes be the triggering factor. With baits the size of musky lures, it's actually quite rare for them to snag bottom to the point that you can't get them off, but make sure your drag isn't too tight. No need for a tight drag while trolling anyway, because with the boat, it will set the hook for you. So basically when a muskie grabs it, if you're trolling along and it grabs the bait,
the rod's not moving and your boat's too heavy.
The hooks are going to get into that fish. That being
Might be a little different if you're in a kayak or canoe, though.
Yes. That being said, it does happen where your lure gets stuck to the point of no retrieve. So again, if you're banging through rocks where the muskie live, sometimes, rarely, you are going to lose a bait, which is terrible because they're expensive, but it's the price, you got to pay to play. So he says, also working mid-lake humps have proven to produce fish. So anywhere you have deep water from 30 to 100 feet, but then it comes up to a shoal that's anywhere between 15 and 20 feet in depth, those are good areas to try. Muskie love to sit at the bottom or on the top waiting for food to swim by so they can ambush them. Damian continues on. He says, I can't stress enough the importance Navionics has played in me learning. Being able to drop markers of fish interactions and or danger or non-trollable areas is a key if you want to become a better troller for muskie. It is a big help into putting the piece of the muskie puzzle together year in and year out. So that was a big spiel about Navionics. Again, we've been using Navionics for ice fishing. It's great for finding spots. It's great for finding shoals, like we said. And you can literally do your homework before you go fishing, plan all these spots. Yeah. And Navionics, I just looked up, it's about $35 a year. So it's not expensive. It's a few bucks a month. And you have all this information that you can plan and be like, hey, Andrew, I want to fish.
On so many lakes.
Yeah, I want to go here, here, and here, and we're going to troll along here. And then, as he said, you can mark spots. Be like, hey, mark a pin. I had a fish follow here. Or mark a pin. There's a big rock sticking out of the water just under the surface to avoid. So it's a really good tool. It's not that expensive, and I think it's worth every penny. And it will 100% help you catch more fish.
And Navionics as well it's $30 a year, and then you can purchase any of their maps. No, it's $30. You get access to it all.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Or $35, whatever it is. There's one last tip there is from Nate, and he says, time on the water is my number one tip. Don't let weather and wind deter you, as these are often prime conditions to get to target these predators. It can be uncomfortable, but if you choose to target these fish, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's a good tip. And there's been many days we went at muskie fishing when it's just like unbearably, the weather's been terrible. Oh, like your hands are freezing. You can't bend your fingers.
I bring winter gloves with me that I keep in a bucket so that when I'm driving the boat, like my hands, I can put the gloves on and go because it's just freezing. I got to bring a garter this year as well. Keep my face and neck warm, because as soon as you start opening it up on the water, everything feels 10 degrees colder, and you're already in -2 degrees, let's say, on a late fall day.
Exactly. But talking about how uncomfortable and terrible it is, there's this drive that keeps musky anglers and people that want to catch these giant fish going, despite all the terrible conditions and all the homework you have to do and all these big baits you have to chuck and the shoulder injuries. But it just keeps you going. And if you haven't caught the musky bug before, I don't know if to say that's good or that's bad, because I really enjoy it. I love it. It's such a learning experience. Like, we haven't fished salmon this fall at all, really. And I don't miss it at all right now. I just, again, we always talk about, like, you have to choose what you want to do every year. I fished salmon for years. Yep. This is my newest little obsession, and even though, I've caught a few muskie this year, but it hasn't been insane. But I'm just, every time I go out, I'm like, today's the day.
Musky fishing, once you catch one, you'll understand why you get the drive, because the excitement you feel of catching a muskie, like we talked about before, you're shaking with excitement. You're pumped. It is so different than catching any other fish.
Yeah.
Because of all this that's build up to finally getting that fish into the boat, into your hands. It is on the verge of being magical.
It is for
to
sure.
have that with you. So that is the drive, that once you get that done once, you want to, maybe not all the time, but you're going to want to go musky fishing again.
Exactly. So just to wrap it up, fall's here. We know the first day of fall was a few days ago, and it's the best time of year to catch, like I said, an absolute unit of
river
a fish.
monster.
So I hope that these tips, they definitely help me.
Yeah, I learned a lot myself.
Yeah, Andrew learned way more than I did. But I hope that they helped you. If you're listening, that's fantastic. Again, if you'd like to help support these guys for giving all these tips, make sure you check out their social media and their YouTube channels. Again, everything's going to be linked down in the show notes. Make sure to give them a follow. And if you really like their tips, send them a message and be like, I listened to the podcast. Those tips were fantastic. Thank you so much. I love when we get messages from you guys. These guys, hopefully, will like those messages too.
Yeah.
But before we finish, I just thought we'd talk about the Musky Maniacs giveaway.
Yep.
So what they're giving away, I can't tell you because I don't know what it is. They are giving away a mystery giveaway. And they're going to be giving, I'm assuming, like, they sell hats and hoodies and bikinis and all this stuff. So it probably won't be a bikini, but I'm hoping it'll be a hat or a hoodie, something like that. But whatever they give you, it's
literally
gonna be
my
legit.
favorite hats are Musky Maniacs hats.
They're really good
They
hats.
have a really good hat blank that they use, manufacturer.
Yeah.
And the patches on it they're all great.
They're
The color
classy.
Combinations, they're such good hats.
I have a gray one with like lime green back, like the mesh.
I've got two. I got
Fantastic.
a green one with like a kind of a tan back.
Yeah.
And then I also have my blue one with a white back. Like they're
They're
such good hats and comfortable.
They're very good. And like we saw them at CanCast. We went into their booth and their hoodies are top quality. They look classy. They're really good. They're really good quality. Highly recommend. Definitely check out them on social media. We'll link everything below, like we said. But they are going to be giving away a mystery giveaway to someone who listens to this podcast. And the only way to enter is to not listen, because you can't listen to Instagram, but watch our Instagram posts where we're going to post the giveaway on our Instagram. So that'll be posted this week coming up as you listen to this. So make sure you put on the post notifications and you can be one of the first persons to enter. So we do appreciate that. We hope that this year you catch the biggest muskie of your life. And if you do, definitely send us a picture of it so we can post it on our social media. So Andrew, we're going to end this episode with quote of the week.
If you want to catch a muskie, wear a Musky Maniacs hat.
That's a pretty good tip.